I found myself rattling around the house with time on my hands, which, in my deteriorating mental state, was a bad situation in which to be. My shift pattern had been changed, and I was on my days off at the same time as Dave. So, one night, January 6, 1994. As it happens, I went round to his house with a pack of beer, a bottle of Southern Comfort, and a couple of war films. When I got there, his wife and 2 kids went to bed, and we settled down for a quiet evening of Hollywood blood and gore. We sat there, getting steadily more and more pissed and reveling in the bloodshed and aggression, when Dave suddenly told me about a local petty thief and lowlife who he was convinced had stolen one of his mountain bikes and scratched his new car. A police detective had apparently tipped him the wink that they knew this guy was responsible. They just couldn't prove it. At this point, celluloid fantasy and Lake District reality became blurred in a sort of haze of adrenaline, hatred, and booze. Dave was ranting about how he wanted to deal with the guy. Dave got more and more wound up by the second, and then he disappeared upstairs. He returned moments later, grinning like a Cheshire cat and holding something wrapped up in a camscarf. He unfolded it and proudly displayed a sawn-off shotgun and several rounds of ammo, cradling it like a father with a new baby. He told me he'd lent it to another guy earlier in the year. The guy had been threatened and wanted protection. Unfortunately, when they came and started kicking in his door, the gun wouldn't work. It looked pretty serviceable to me. The idiot had probably forgotten to load it. This was a view Dave shared. He grabbed a combat jacket, picked up an S10 respirator to be found lying in a corner in most homes, surely, and looked at me with a wicked glint in his eye. "Come on," he said, breaking it and slotting into orange 12-bore cartridges. "I'll show you the bloody thing works." As it happened, I was dressed in a Paris smock, black woolly hat, jeans, boots, and Northern Ireland gloves. You can take the man out of the army, but you can't take the army out of the man. Not completely, anyway. While at least I was wearing the right gear for an op like this, but I declined his offer and decided to go home to my pregnant wife instead. Stupidly, I had left my fingerprints on the gun, and even more stupidly, Dave went on to fire it that night through the window of his target's house. Later that night, I was followed home and arrested by an armed response unit. I protested my innocence, which did me a lot of good. My dabs were all over the gun, and we were both jointly charged with possession of a sawn-off shotgun with intent to endanger life. I was certainly guilty of being stupid. I was in a state of shock, especially when a grinning copper advised me that the maximum sentence I could get for this was life. I should have stayed home tonight. I thought. I had started reading a book called The Featherman, an everyday tale of contract killers, psychopathic mercenaries, and black ops, at the poolside in Florida. I finished reading it in a dirty, smelly, cold police cell in Barrow. Oddly, in a mix of emotions, I felt some relief that my security job was finished. In fact, it seemed as though my working career was probably finished for good. As for myself, there are only 2 things I can say in my own defense. The first is that firearms and soldiers go together. It seemed to me totally natural for Dave to be standing there in his living room holding a loaded weapon and looking murderously left and right, whereas I can see that it might not seem at all natural from a civilian point of view. Dave was also a trained British Army sniper. Once again, I know what Dave did was wrong, but in mitigation, Dave had also served in Northern Ireland. He was on top cover in an army Land Rover, and some youths had thrown a paving slab off a bridge, hitting Dave on the head, smashing his helmet in 2 pieces and seriously injuring him. He was lucky not to have been killed. Mitigating circumstances. I don't suppose the police officer who gave Dave the information in the first place realized the consequences of telling him, but he should have known better in such a position of authority. The weather station incident in the Falklands and the incident at Dave's had parallels. Both involved alcohol and firearms with a good measure of stupidity and bravado thrown in. One was in a theater of war, one was in a living room in peacetime with women and children, asleep upstairs. Those involved were soldiers, or in the latter case, ex-soldiers, men that had a lethal firearm strapped to their wrists for most of their career and thought it the norm. It's even worse in the United States, where firearms are a way of life and readily available. This adds to the massive problem with returning veterans taking their own lives with a weapon. In 2012, 6,500 former military personnel killed themselves. 177 serving soldiers also committed suicide by using their own issued weapon. Once I was released from custody, I began to live in my own world. I had lost another friend, and Julie begged me to seek medical help. I wore combat gear and dog tags night and day and began sleeping rough on the beach, digging myself into the sand and pebbles, until the flu forced me back inside. I was losing my grip on reality. I had also begun experiencing more and more flashbacks. These had been around for a while, but were growing more frequent and intense, the more stressed, depressed, and sleep-deprived I became. Flashbacks are very difficult to explain to people who have never experienced them. You wide awake. Mine almost always happened during the day, and your vision of the given incident is as clear and real as if you are really back there. At the same time though, the rest of the world is there, too. It wasn't as though I was suddenly transported back to the Falklands. Part of my brain knew the flashback was in my imagination, but the rest of me couldn't help reacting as I would if it wasn't. My heartbeat would go mad, my adrenaline would surge, and I'd either want to hide or fight or cry. I had a variety, but the most common was an air attack. I would see as clear as day, for a split second, a white Argentinian Navy Skyhawk streaking towards me. The cockpit area was like a huge pilot's helmet, with the pilot staring at me. He was bombing me, and I was shooting at him. And, to my ears, the air would be filled with the shriek of jet engines, close, low, and at full power. Then it would be gone. Dave, to his credit, took full responsibility for the incident with the gun and told the police it had nothing to do with me, and he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. This added to my sense of guilt that I should have done more to help him. I know he was a grown man, but I should have told him not to be so stupid. I had to bear some responsibility. As they say, hindsight is a wonderful thing. If you are enjoying this, please like and subscribe. Read the whole story with A.A. McNally and his book Still Watching Men Burn: Fighting the PTSD War.